We all remember the Cortinas, Minis, and Capris that used to control the roads in Britain. But it's the tiny things that are easy to forget and the losers of the 1950s and 1960s that will definitely spark when seen again memories you thought you had lost. And a lot of these old English automobiles you might be hearing about for the first time. The Austin Maxi is a type of car promised the future but never got the love it needed. It was Alex's last hurrah in 1969. Izigenis, the one who gave us the Mini, and in a lot of ways, it revealed his gift for smart packaging. The problem was, British Leland was already getting tighter. Belts and deals were made before it even got off the drawing board. The Maxi was the first real 500R in Britain hatchback in that middle-sized family class. A neat idea at a time when most of us were still playing with saloon boots and vehicles for sale. It was inside. Light and sensible with seats that folded up in every possible direction. The back bench went flat, the fronts leaned back. Some families even used it as a caravan stand-in throughout the holidays. And under the hood sat the first Erie's engine from BMC was the 1500, the 1750 later, which drove the front wheels through a gearbox with 5 speeds. Uncommon in its class at the time, it had the makings of a great machine. Suspension with hydrolastic give it a soft ride. The hatchmade was useful and the 5-speed box was thinking ahead, but early vehicles had problems with a gear that worked with a cable relationship that was so unclear you never really knew whether you were in second or steering groove. Styling was also limited by cutting costs. Those doorways that carry over from the bigger Austin 1800 made it a little bit proportions that are odd. In the end, Maxi did well at the box office. Above they made for 100,000 of them, but they were never caught. The Cortina or even the Allegro that came later. Too sensible to be gorgeous and too smart to be easy. But nowadays, you can't help but see it as a car that was ahead of its time. One that showed us how family driving would look like, even if we weren't quite ready for it. The Bond Minicar was Lorry Bond made Preston, who is developed by Sharp's advertising. We were just come out of rationing. Steel was scarce, and money is even scarcer. A lot of people couldn't even think about being able to afford a full-size engine. So this 3-wheeled thing came up. Wonder to keep the country going. It looked like a toy automobile. To be honest, a 1-wheel in front and 2 in back, and an engine that was stolen from a Villiers bike. All 120 centimeters of it at the beginning. It was built of aluminum panels, light. Some fiberglass came in later. But comforts, forget it. A few variants didn't even bother to put in a reverse gear. If you wished to back out, you may either pressed or begin on some models engine going in reverse. Sounds dumb, but it functioned because it only had 3 wheels. It got through all kinds of tax breaks. Insurance is cheaper, less expensive to buy, and in some circumstances you potentially let someone drive with a motorcycle license. A lot of cars tried to look better later, featuring chrome that shines and curved windshields, bumpers, and even some style. But there was no doubt that this was austerity driving. But around 25,000 were made, for it was the small Lancashire automobile for a while. That made the unthinkable possible. If the Bond was about getting by, the Singer Gazelle was about getting ahead in the world. When Ritz took over Singer in '56, they started to change the old make mark a little wiser. The Gazelle was their main attempt, basically a toted-up Hillman Imp, but don't let that mislead you. It arrived as a bar, an estate, or even a convertible if you wanted to show off. Versions from the past had a Singer overhead cam engine, but that was later changed to Ritz's more normal job as a pushrod. It still had a presence. Ordak's body design, a clean grille, and chrome along the sides, and an inside that felt like a cut above, dash veneer, right trim, and even a bench seat up front. Not quick, but easy to wear. By the time when Series 5 came out in '63, you obtaining front disc brakes and synchro mesh on first gear and doors that didn't need a rugby scrum to shut. Later automobiles featured engines with 17 25 cubic centimeters of space. around 65 horses with the choice of an automated, which was pretty fancy for the time. The problem was that the Gazelle was always the root's middle child who no one remembers family. Not as sporty as a Sunbeam, but as prevalent as a Hillman, but only for a short time spell. It added a touch of class to people like you and me. The Barclay T60 is a real oddity now. Built in Biggleswade, Bedfordshire by a small company that makes caravans of everything. They tried vehicles, focusing on fiberglass micro sports machines. The T60 was their third W away to get into the realm of budget driving, and it got there just before the business went out of business in 1960. This was not ordinary three-wheeler. With a little 328 fiberglass body CM Excelsior 2-stroke twin engine and a 4-speed gearbox with reverse, it was more sports car in spirit than shopping trolley. You may even place an order for a variant with a hard top or the rare, for type that fit to kid seats inside on top of the back wheel. About 50 of those were ever created. Very light and quick in the corners, it could hit about 60 miles per hour. Fast enough to feel the breeze in your hair without shaking your loose dentures. Best of all, like the you could ride bond on a motorcycle. License which will save you a lot of money, taxes, and insurance. Sadly, Barclay left broke not long after, but for that short the T60 showed that 3 wheels were in the window. Might be a little bit fancy. Britain was pushing in the late 1950s forward. People had more money than just to get by. Cars were becoming more than tools. They were sentences, in that the Ford Anglia 105e came out in this time. It came out in 1959 and took the place of earlier models that sought to look more modern, sweep in some way, but still be cheap enough for a lot of families with jobs. More than original run lasted until 1967, and it sold more than 1 million copies. They manufactured some of them. It was a great automobile. It was small, had 2 doors, and weighed with that iconic backward rake rear window. It weighs less than 750 kilograms, the back window of the rake. That backslanted, the window wasn't just for show. It gave you have more choices later on with their equivalents for estates and vans. Ford said it would stay clearer in the rain, and it made the Anglia look strange. For little British automobiles of the time, it featured a manual gearbox with 4 speeds. First, Ford employed one in certain of its smaller models. The front suspension was type of McPherson strut. Back was a leaf springs or drums to stop. It was quick, but it was fast enough for what came before. The style was based on partly because of the huge American automobiles, the tail fins toned down, the nose bent, the glamour signals. Also, it sold well. Almost there are about 130,000 saloons and 1 million of them, estates and a few vans. It had primary flaws, of course, are rust and where the mounts for the rubber strap, which go on the back leaf springs that are drooping and things like that stuff. But for a lot of folks, it was the small Ford that was everywhere doing its work. Fast forward 10 years or so, now here comes something that looks like a toy from a sci-fi movie instead of a car that makes sense. The Bug Bond, made from 1970 to 1974 by Bond after Reliant took control. The Bug had 3 wheels and 2 seats, but boy did it throw away the usual. In the shape of a wedge, a fiberglass body, and a lift-up canopy instead of regular doors. Side some types have displays, and some are bright tangerine. Paint almost always, very little in terms of frills. Tom came up with the design. Karen Ogle design. It was really lightweight body, thus it worked well more lively than you'd expect given the size of the engine. The highest speed was about 76 miles per hour in newer models. Because it's so tight space, it doesn't have much inside. An optional heating and ashtray, maybe. Extra wheel is optional. It was very little. Brave, rude. It was different. But just 2,268 there were a total of bugs. If you think about what British little automobiles normally did, the Bug was a design rebellion. You could see from a mile away that it was created. For enjoyment, for color, and for variety. Now, the Hillman Imp is something that tried to mix economical driving with technical invention with some good and some bad effects, but enough success to make a difference. In the after the Suez Crisis in the early 1960s, there was a huge push since fuel prices were going up. For autos that don't cost a lot, Group of Roots started Project Apex, which Mike designed Parks and Tim Fry are making this kind of automobile. In Linwood, Scotland, it was erected in a new plant backed by the government. The Imp was tiny rear end with an all-aluminum 875 centimeters overhead cam in a line or at an angle to the engine at 45. It had separate front and fold-down back seat, rear suspension, and an opening the back window to get to a small boot and even a front nose space. It could stop roughly 39 times. Horsepower. Quite capable in its day for rallies, hill climbs, and racing in its class. The Imp is in motorsport. Got some sparkle. There were Rally Imp versions. Wins in the Tulpen Rally, victories in the British Saloon Car in 1965. Bill McGovern won the championship in 1970. Early reliability wasn't without its critics. Problems, quality control, and cooling issues, and so on. But a lot of people liked how it drove and how alive it felt, how different it was. The production lasted until 1976, when around 440,000 Imps were manufactured throughout its time. In the middle of the 1950s, after Britain was still in World War II, tightening its belt. Fuel rationing was over, yet everything was still pricey and people sought cheap transportation. Top or rate. The Cars Limited, which is more often known for SS-type autos, attempted something really different. The AC Petite is a microcar. Very much of the austere time, the Petite had 3 wheels. Sedan with a Velia engine in the back, 1-cylinder, 2-stroke engine. It had a narrow body and a bench seat for 2, a design that is simple but appealing. The versions from 1952 to 1955 had the Villars to 7B engine, has an 8-inch front wheel, bigger rear spoke wheels. Later they made some little improvements in the MK2 with the Villars to 8B and made the wheels made some of the things more even and clean cut. The fuel efficiency was very good for the time, about 60 to 70 meters per gallon, which was great for a car, even a tiny automobile. The top speed was not very fast, about 40 miles per hour, but running costs were low because it was so light and easy. Very little. Built about 4,000 in altogether. The way it was styled was also strange. The back arrangement, notchback body, making it looks quite strange, even in its own day. On the other hand, the Austin A for Ina arrived when folks were ready for something more than just cutting back. They desired modernity. Launched in 1958 by BMC Austin, it replaced the A35, and they asked for the first time on the A40 line. Yes, Pinfina is the Italian style house. To help with the design, giving a sleek 2-box shape for the automobile. It was a tiny saloon with a long front 948 centimeters, a series engine at first, then changed to 1.98 centimeters in subsequent variants. Drive from the back. Front suspension is independent and has coils, springs, semi-rear alive axle with drum brakes, elliptical leaf springs, all around with lot of subtle touches. You got a split tailgate that pushed toward what we now call this a hatchback idea. The inside had separate front seats, folding backbench options like a heater, radio, and even white wall tires for those who like to show off a little. The A40 Harina appeared more modern than a lot of its competitors. Also, its usefulness, the space was good for a modest car for its day, notably in the Countryman Estate version. Now let's skip ahead to the 1970s, when people were hurt by high fuel prices. Again, seeking for anything little, affordable. Reliant, known for their small 3-wheeled cars, decided to make a real 4-wheel tiny automobile. Out came the 1975 Reliant Kitten. Made in Tamworth, the Kitten is a small business. The automobile comes in both a saloon and estate version. Van, it has an 848 cubic centimeters all aluminum inline for engine. light but good for its size, was placed in front. The back part of its chassis was very similar to that of the Rialto or Reliant Robin three-wheelers, but from the middle it was different going forward. Front, the suspension was based on a double wishbone design by Lotus to make it easier to drive. Body was made of fiberglass over a steel frame. The car got great gas mileage. Dependable pushed it as 57, 5 mpg gallon or about that time, which was a key selling point at that time. It also gave added upgrades, better trim options such black or tan inside, chilly gray roof linings since it was good for the economy. You didn't receive a lot of flash, but it was useful. The room for bags got a lot better with the back chairs folded, especially in the several types of estate and van. And what's intriguing is it looked a lot like a four-wheel Robin, which a lot of people pointed out back then that the adjustments at the front appearance and engine position gave it a different sense. Now, for something less common and more specific. The Clan Crusader was made in beginning in Washington County, Durham. The Clan Motor Company made it in 1971. A group of Exodus engineers got together and planned to make a sports car out of fiberglass coupe that runs on Hillman Imp sport stuff. Not as heavy as most automobiles of at that time, it weighed between 600 and 615 kilograms. Crusader looks great. More athletic than most coupes of its period. It didn't work well because it was heavy. Excellent than you'd think for a little engine. Quick and ideal for slopes and curvy roads. It also has that an indigenous, almost kit car feel in components, but some were sold homemade. There were only around 315 of them, made on that first run. Money, the company didn't make it because of problems, not live long. Then there's the Toledo Triumph. In British land introduced it in 1970 as an option that costs less than the Triumph 1300 to 1500. You may say it was the entrance Triumph. It was made until 1976. It had a simple design, front engine, drive the back wheels. The design was easier than dolomitized Triumphs, one gray rectangular headlamp plastic grille instead of two round ones, lighting, and a trim that is easier to use. It was able to be a proper little saloon with Triumph branding that doesn't cost as much as $1 may. So in showrooms, it appealed to people who wanted to be important on a money. There were a lot of built, roughly 113,000 of the 1,300 versions. Some of the performance was okay. 0 to 60 miles per hour in the 1300 could take more than 17 seconds. The 1500 is a little better. Automobile that you can count on overall, even with the large recall in 1973 for parts of the front suspension after a flaw was found. People really liked the style of the jet era. Britain in the late 1950s, and into that heavy came the Meadows Frisky Sport. A bubble automobile coupe is almost scary in its goal. Meadows Playful Cars laid, a little business that came from Henry Meadows, started the Frisky Sport in 1958 after making a few just a year prior. They made prototypes. It made a tremendous splash at the Earl's Court show in 1957. People were looking at beautiful sketches and brochures that featured different variations of never went into production. The automobile was really a lot of spaceships on wheels for its time. Los Along two-door, open-top sports style having very small dimensions. The prototype was put through a lot of testing to see what it might be, and the style was very dramatic. Curved lines, signs, and impact lights, and so on. The prototypes had hidden door hinges and the chassis or constructed inside the square part subsheet fiberglass floor to make it stronger. Only a few lively sports are still around today. Maybe a dozen or so are known. It never really got to mass manufacturing. The costs were too high and the market was too little. But there is still an automobile with more creative than most. Vauxhall figured it out by the early 1960s, lost out on the tiny family boom automobiles. The Viva Ha came out in September 1963. It was their first significant small automobile since before the war. It had to be easy to use, dependable, affordable, something a working family, not a show pony, but something you could count on. The Viva Ha is a two-door sedan with a front engine, rear-wheel drive. The frame was light and easy to control, good visibility, excellent gear lever, and brief, things that people like who drove them around town every day and country and city. The bad news is corrosion was always there, common among several Valhols from that time. A lot Havas are either gone or have been substantially mended. More than 300,000 Havivas, though, were made. It did what it was supposed to do. Honest, reliable, and not to flashy transportation running costs, and yet now a lot of the time forgotten, overtaken by more flashy models. This one is for the fans. Davian in 1967, Developments Limited was started. By Adrian Evans and David Clark, they made automobiles that were mostly based on Hillman Imp mechanics. The Davrian Imp, or some people name it the Impaced Davrian, was a coupe with a glass fiber monocoque body sold mostly as kits or parts. It wasn't like most things. Vehicle. It was developed for people who enjoy to fix things and enjoy the show. Most Davians used the 875 from IMP centimeter aluminum alloy engine with its transaxle. Suspension in the front and back parts from the IMP because the performance was good because the body shell was so light. Good, easy to handle, and good in a club motorsports and climbing hills. And the fact that it was being sold as a kit meant you may make it yourself and choose what more things or how far to go. For motorsport people, this was a blessing. Sometime later, Davians even replaced engines that didn't work, based on what the builder wanted. They never got a great total scale. Production of about 500 over their whole lives before money problems bit.